All right, hi, it's Shay back for another episode of Making Grace Valor. So I'll start with a shot I've been chasing for a little bit, trying to get. So there's a sequence in the pilot where Grace and her family and the caravan they're a part of land on an outpost just on the edge of civilized space before they travel into the void. So they go and refuel and restock and just one last chance to turn back. So I wanted something, fairly exotic um, for that. And I wanted a pretty good bit of control. It's going to have a lot of ships, a lot of structures, and I wanted to really keep those organized. With the ships, you want to keep things in scale small ships, large ships, medium ships, huge ships. So that's kind of the tricky part with AI. If I were to just kind of try to prompt this uh, with specific ship designs I had, it would put them all together in a spaceport and they would all be different scales or they might all be the same scale. There's no relationships there between large and small. It would just decide on its own what it wanted to be. So I wanted to be able to control that. And I've been kind of trying to figure this out for a while. One way to do that would be to sketch it all out really tight uh, and have each ship identifiable in the sketch. But we're talking 25 ships, maybe. I don't know, 20, 25 ships. So in your sketch, all of that has to match up so that the model can see the ship reference and put it in the right place, which is uh, not going to happen yet. It might in a later version of Nano Banana or something, but right now that's just too much to ask of it. So I wanted control over that. And the way I've been kind of playing around to figure that out is I know that I can use a reference for composition, so like I could do a sketch of that. But I assumed that if I used a 3D model and took just a flat render of that, I could use that. So the way I started this process was to start with my spaceport look. Now this is just a picture taken in my hometown in an empty parking lot. These old empty tanks, and I thought, well, those would make a great sci-fi something. So I went and shot some pictures of them and used this, and then prompted that in Arcana in a couple different models, and started to get a lot of results. Now, what's weird about this first batch is everything was upside down, but you can see that it's working in those main components of the photo. But why it was putting them upside down, I have no clue. That's just, AI. But then it flips it over and puts it there. It didn't keep the composition like I was wanting to. And some of that's the Sea Dream model for this task. It didn't want to do that. Got some nice stuff, but again, things are upside down. This is really weird. So I switched to a different way of working with this. And there is a trick to getting an image to work as a compositional aid. Sometimes you can just use a straight photo for color. Sometimes you have to do a little something different. So what I did was I took the image into Photoshop and made it high contrast black and white, where basically I'm just getting the outlines of the image. Once I did that and switched to Nano Banana, it started to kind of obey the composition better. Like that is, pretty close to that. It's not perfect, but it gets it across. So then I'm getting a much more consistent result in something that is referencing that image and getting closer to that composition. Now they do go off a little bit again depending on which model you switch to. Some are better at this than others. Nano Banana seems to be the winner most of the time, but others will give you unexpected results too. So it's good to run multiple models, which is really easy to do in Arcana. And then your prompt, how detailed it is, what references you put in the prompt are going to matter. And as soon as I drop in the name Ralph McQuarrie, I start to get different results. Compositions are better, just as a result of being trained on McQuarrie work. But you do get interesting things. Now, none of these are going to be used directly. Again, I'm just looking for inspiration and source, and you'll see at the end how all this stuff comes into play. And if you're going to do sci-fi stuff, you're going to have droids and familiar spaceships in there. But I'm looking for composition and elements I can use. Again, you can see those tanks showing up. And then here I told it to do that image in a real world version. Again, with the Star Wars reference, particularly the film. And it, of course, threw it in a desert, but that's fine. I'm just looking for things I can use and how these layouts might be. So I go through, and all these are boring and dull. But this one really sticks to that, my original composition. It's got the age on it, a little bit of that influence from the Macquarie example, but it's not a blatant rip-off. It just, okay, it feels dirty and used and worn. So I like these. And they start to get more of that feel that I want, more aged. So what I'm looking for basically are things I can pull out of these now. Like I like this bunker here. I like some of those things it's creating. Just some multi-shots. Again, this is all just source material. I'm going to just mine as much of this material as I can. And so some are so wildly different from others, but I'm just going to take them all and combine them together. Again, I'm just getting sources. This is not a final product. So once I've got enough of my sources together, I go back and look at my inspiration. Just give it one more go, and I've selected certain things. And then I start to combine these photos as references and generate stuff like this. I'm going to go back to my jungle world with the mesa on top that you saw in a previous video if you watched it. But I just generate some different shots, just different angles, different cinematic compositions. Once I do that, I go through all those images and pull certain references. So I extract those big fuel tanks from one image. I'll extract the bunker from another, and this garage from another, and this garage from another. So I'm just, with Nano Banana, I can go in and select an element from a scene and pull it out. And then I generate a landing pad that I like and separate it out too. And then I decide I want it on a mesa. So I set it on top of a mesa and pull that out of the image. Next thing I do is these reference images and all the spaceships. I've got a video on how I designed the fleet, the Armada, and all the spaceships. So you can check that out. But what I did is I get these really good single view reference images. And this is one of those instances where I had to leave Arcana for this. But there are a couple of online apps where you can take an image and make a 3D model. So at this stage, I want models of all the ships. I want models of the landing pad. I want models of the bunker and the garages and the tanks. So what I can do is I can take my photo, load it here into Meshy, generate a model. I can generate low poly models and high quality textures, different options. And it'll spit out a pretty good model from a single perspective photo. These were like a 3/4, I think. And it does a pretty good job with texture too. Okay, so that's not bad. Texture's pretty good and pretty accurate to what the photo was. And so I've gotten more here. So that's pretty good. It gives me good views on all sides. Now I haven't gone in and designed those sides. Like most of these, there are just one view, and so the modeler made up the back view and the bottom view for most of these. That's fine. What I'm trying to get is a model with a good, clean texture that I can import into my 3D app, my modeling app, and build a set from. So for this, I jumped into Blender, and I've used Maya and Nomad Sculpt mostly. I've not used Blender. Blender was fun to try to get around. It has some weird quirks that kind of threw me off a little bit, but I was able to bring all those different models in, go in and lay out my set, scale my spaceships, because all the spaceships came in at the same scale. This little guy here was the same scale as the big guy there, right? So by bringing it into Blender or any 3D modeling program, I was able to go ahead and set scale. And then I'm able to go ahead and set up my shots. I've got options to do different views on different cameras. So that's like an establishing shot. There's a close-up of another important scene in the same set, which is also why it's nice to build a set like this. So I've got a big scene that happens here that I want to make sure that is consistent with the rest of that sequence on this planet. But I can go in and do ground level shots and all kind of stuff. So I can set up as many cameras as I want and render out as many flat shaded shots as I need to, which is what I do here. And I could go ahead and probably have them render out lit shots with better texture and shading, but this works for what I'm trying to do. So I've got different shots here. Okay. So this is using this particular shot, or maybe it's this first one here. Maybe it's that guy, as a reference in Arcana. So I brought it into Modify, and then what I have is I've got a document with my reference image for this building, for the double garage, for the little garage, for the tank, and then I've got a master reference for all of the spaceships. And so I tell Nano Banana Pro to use those references to recreate all of this imagery with the correct texture, or with a high fidelity texture, right? So instead of getting this, it goes in and it's able to, because on the models, the basic color palettes are the same, they match up with what the high quality reference image is, it's pretty good at applying those to the individual models. Right? These are pretty good. Now some of them, this one was a little bit out of the shot, so it's a little weird. You do get some weirdness here and there, but overall, it does a good job of recreating those textures. And then I'm able to set up, okay, just from a few good angles like here, I can use those three references and set up a grid. This is one render asking Nano Banana Pro to give me a grid of 21, 9 different images on the page from different perspectives, different views. And generally, they're all pretty accurate to the layout here. But then I decided, well, I didn't want this to be on a desert. I wanted it to be on top of this mesa in the jungle, like I thought about on some other stuff and like some of those earlier images. So I went in and played around with some different models and rendered out this. And I was able to take this as a source image and have Nano Banana map the reference of the outpost to the top of it. So it spit out a couple different versions. This one at the bottom right's kind of wild. I kind of dig that, but not what I need for this. And then I'm able to play around with different lighting, different angles, different time of day. Now there are variations within each of these. None of these are exactly consistent with the other. So I ended up having to render quite a bit, to try quite a bit to get exactly what I wanted. And that's where this layout is pretty much it. The people on this, I threw in later. I'll do another video on how I populated it with people that, again, aren't just done by prompting. They're designed elsewhere and then brought into the image. But I'll do a video on that. But the layout's pretty exact here, where the ships are, where the tanks are, where the buildings are. So it's pretty much exactly what I wanted. Once I do that, I can get some other angles on things, different lighting conditions. This is one of those shots, one of those flat shaded shots I brought in and applied those reference images to and composited all in Nano Banana Pro. And then once you kind of get enough, you can start having it generate other shots from other angles. And I just do it in grids to just give me some different options. Like here's a shot. I didn't compose that at all. I had my images that I was happy with the placement, the construction, and everything, and the lighting. And I just told it to give me random shots from the ground. And those are all pretty shots. And here's some more. It's added a guy in here. Now it throws a ship in here that's, at the wrong size. But I could take that out in Photoshop in 10 seconds, right? Or I could have Nano Banana take it out, but Photoshop's, good at that kind of stuff for free and doesn't cost credits. But it's populated this, and it feels like it's on that landing pad in that same world. This is really good. These things feel like they're designed to be there, like they're set there. Now, if I were to go and try to compare these to my establishing shot, they're not going to match up. They're just not. But that's fine because these are just flavor, right? These are just to kind of create the atmosphere of the set. And they're going to be seen for like 1 or 2 seconds, and none of the action's going to happen here. They're just like just quick little shots. This is a really nice shot. We've got a journalist. I had this as like a photojournalism style shot. So that's why we get this guy with the boots here. But that's a pretty shot. That's really nice. And again, I don't know that I would have come up with that, in Blender, setting a camera there and gotten anything like that. But then, again, I just tell it to render out a bunch of street level shots. And shots from different perspectives. And some establishing shots and aerial views. And again, I've populated it with creatures that come from some other work I've been working on. That's a nice shot from inside the garage. That's good. It's good texturing. So lots of options to play around with here. But again, it took a while to get to this, to where I've got my set, and it's complicated and complex, and things need to be certain sizes. And that plays out later in specific scenes where I need that. For those like little filler shots, it's not as important as long as they feel like they're in the right place. But it's good to have, this overall set piece that I know works. So that's how you deal with like setting up a really complex shot. With a layout, you need things to be in specific places, specific size and scale relations to other things. It takes a lot of prompting. I could have kept prompting and gotten things absolutely perfect, but I got what I needed for what I'm trying to do here. Again, this is probably between generating the models of all the ships and all the spaces and everything. It's probably a day's work to get to this stuff. But it's going to make other stuff easier down the road. Plus, kind of working out that workflow will make things more easy to control later on. And as the models get better, as Nano Banana releases 3 and Seedream 4.5 becomes Seedream 5, as those models get better at doing this kind of stuff, this will go even smoother. But that's a workflow that I've just kind of figured out that's work. I think it's going to be really helpful controlling shots. And again, you can prompt a lot of shots that are great, but sometimes you want more control over perspective and angle and setting and all that stuff. So once I've got all my shots done, and I think I've got some that I want to use, what I like to do is in Arcana move them from modify into enhance, which allows you to go in and add detail and crispness and kind of make them a little bit more visually interesting. It just, I don't know, it gives them sharpness and detail. So there's a slider here that you can see the difference. If you look at the eyes on the creature, by going in and enhancing them, it really brings those out. This one, same thing. The sharpness that it brings to everything, and the additional detail is really pretty good. Now some things will go way, depending on how high your settings are, some things may go way off model, but as atmosphere, that's okay. Here's a good example of the spaceport outpost. Is you can see that, especially down here in the bottom of the mesa, that kind of gets crispier, I guess. You've got a wide range of settings you can choose to do that with. Of course, once I've got a good image there where I've got as much detail as I want, I can't help but hop over into motion. Again, it's so easy. It's so easy to just click a button and, give some animation to your scene. Again, depending on your prompt, what you get is, you can control more and more with your prompt.
Check the cargo. Everything is secure.
So I didn't prompt for that dialogue. It just added in its own.
Everything is secure.
It's okay. Run another version of it.
What's the blue button for?
Don't worry, it doesn't do anything.
So weird stuff goes on in this one, but that's fine.
Don't worry, it doesn't do anything.
It's just a click of a
What's
button.
the blue button?
But man, it's nice to be able to just go from that enhanced image to motion with a click and see how stuff's working. So thanks for tuning in.